Welcome, it's Jeremy Allen Gould. I'm coming to you today to confirm between God and of man that in fact the rumors that you have all heard are true. I started this podcast because I freaking love music. I was privileged enough to book amazing artists and bands in the past, and I was lucky enough to stay in touch with many of them to this day. This is a place to hear their stories. Thank you so much for riding along on this journey, and I hope you enjoy what you hear. With that said, the rumors are definitely true. Hey, this is Jeremy. Welcome back to this latest episode where we welcome Blake Martin from the band A Plea For Purging. Blake and I talk about the past, about him being in the band from the beginning to the end of the band. We also touch on the Furnace Fest show that the reunion, I guess, they've got coming up. And it's really cool to see his perspective on the band that was such a big part of his life and what he's doing now. So I really hope you enjoy this latest episode with Blake Martin.
Blake, how the hell are you?
What's up? I am great. I'm caffeinated. I need to be fully caffeinated on a Monday morning.
Oh, yeah.
I have to get that in my bloodstream before I do anything meaningful in my life.
You know, it's funny. I don't drink coffee. My wife laughs at me. I've never drank. Well, I drank coffee when I was a kid, and it made me sick, and I've never done it since. I know. I'm probably one of few.
Whoa.
Yeah, well, I think it was the caffeine, and I was 12, and it was just rocked my world, and I was like, I'll never drink that again.
It is a drug. Okay, it is a drug.
Well, my drug is cigars, so I'm just probably worse.
Dude, if I didn't have asthma, I would be in the cigar game too, because I really enjoy them. They just don't enjoy me.
Dude, I just got into them in the last 3 years, especially during when COVID. I was bored at home, and my father-in-law is super into them, and my wife's all okay with it, and I'm like, okay, let's do this.
Yeah, something else to spend money on. Dude, it's crazy. I'm a caffeine fiend for sure. Back when we were touring, it was kind of the daily activity to go find a Starbucks and use their free Wi-Fi and get on our laptops and drink coffee before the show, and I could drink so much coffee back then. Nowadays, now that I'm getting older, if I have more than 2 cups ish, I start to get anxious. I get keyed up and where I need to chill out. Yeah, it's weird. But I have to have it in the mornings or I get headaches.
Yeah, well, that's my wife's the same way. She's she's cranky and in a funk, and it's she's bought these 2 new Nespresso or whatever, and her justification was, I don't have to go to Starbucks every day anymore. And I'm
I'm saving money.
In a weird way, she kind of is. I mean, really realistic, she is, but I mean, hey, whatever. But
love it.
She lets me buy the cigars, so I'm okay with it.
There you go.
So, man, tell me what you're up to now. It's been a while. I know we talked a couple months ago, but just to let me know what's going on in your life, man. It's been a while since we've seen each other.
Yeah, so quick rundown. I mean, the band ended 2012. That was our last show, and we played that Facedown Fest in 2017, which was kind of it's great, but it was also a disaster, which I can tell you that story about that experience too. But me personally, after the band ended, Aaron and I actually both worked at airlines at the airport, throwing bags. Just trying to get our foot back into the workforce and figure out what it's like to have a job. So
not live in a van.
Yeah. So that was kind of crazy. But we both worked at the airline for a while. Then I was there is and was a brewery in town at the time. It was downtown called Yazoo, and it was kind of my dream job. I was man, if I could just brew beer every day, that's the dream, that's so sick.
Totally.
So my wife and I started working in the tap room. She was doing tours of the brewery, and I was just serving and pouring beer in the tap room, and just kept begging the owner just to let me work production in the back. It was salary, and you have health insurance. I've never had that before. I want that. So after that, took about a year or so, and then he gave me a job brewing beer and working in production in the back, which is great. And so I was there for about 6, almost 7 years. And then in 2018, I quit that job to start a home inspection company, and that's what I've been doing ever since. It's been growing. It's been awesome. I love working for myself, which is really cool. And I got my brother-in-law a job there before I quit, so I can still get free beer. So that was called a really smart investment.
That's called a blessing.
That's right. He's since gone to another brewery in town called Fat Bottom, but I was super into craft beer back then, and still am. I still love really good craft beer, but it was a hard job, and I had a rental property. And still have it, but after just kind of learning the ins and outs of owning a home and maintenance and, doing a lot of the work myself, like home inspection kind of clicked for me pretty quick. Yeah. So I love doing it, man. I've got a couple people working with me now, and to where I'm not having to be out in the field every day. I can work from home most days, so I can do this kind of stuff and play guitar, which is great. But yeah, that's kind of my life, man. I'm married. I've got 2 dogs. One of them's really old and kind of, enjoying our last bit of time with her, which is really sad, but life is good, dude. My wife and I, we don't have kids, which kind of frees us up to do a little bit more, I feel like, in general. So we travel a lot. I don't know. We really love international travel. And of course, COVID put a
damper.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, we're getting back into it this year. Going back to Japan this year for my 40th birthday, which is crazy. We went for my 35th birthday and ended up quitting that brewery job like 2 weeks later. I was like, this is so amazing. I got to do more of this. Like, I love traveling. So yeah, awesome. we love that kind of stuff. But man, we're super lucky and we feel very thankful. But we're doing well, man. Life is good. And I still get to see Andy every now and then when he's not working. He's grinding pretty hard with his burger truck. So
what's a burger truck? I was just trying to remember what that was called.
It's called Bad Luck Burger Club. Yeah, and the long story short is that he pretty much lost his job during COVID. And another buddy of ours named Cody, Andy and Cody started grilling cheeseburgers.
Is it
the wedding.
From the wedding, yeah.
Cody Driggers. Yeah. So we've all been buddies for years and years and years, and he and Andy just got together and just shared a love for food and cheeseburgers, especially. So they started doing their flat tops and got a little tent and did little pop-ups around town. It was like immediate hype. I mean, it was like lines around the building kind of thing. So
that's amazing.
They've since got a food truck that's freaking awesome. It looks super cool, and their burger is literally my favorite burger in town. Like, I know I'm biased, but it really, really is like a super good cheeseburger. So he's killing it. So he's still in town, but yeah, Aaron, he lives in California, works for basically a lumber distributor and does like sales for that. Doing really well. He's got a little girl named Winnie, super cute. Oh. And John is in the Knoxville area, or Maryville, Tennessee, in East Tennessee. And he's a firefighter at Air Force Base, and they have a 5-year-old. I don't think he's turned 6 yet. But yeah, that got a little kid, him and his wife. So yeah, we're all still friends and buddies, and we all still send farts to each other on a group text. So that's how mature we are at this point in our life.
I love that. That's amazing. That's so cool. So let's talk about when you and I kind of met. I was trying to think back, and you and I both have terrible memories, obviously. I know I booked you guys quite a few times. I would say probably 4 to 5 at least in Wichita. And it was like at the Eagles Lodge. Did I do you guys at Headway Skate Park? Does that ring a bell too? I'm not sure.
It doesn't ring a bell to me, but that doesn't mean much.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe.
I'm pretty sure it was Eagles Lodge primarily, but I know I got you guys with like O Sleeper once and probably even twice, to be honest with you. I mean, I hate to say this, but it was like after a certain point, it was just like I can't even remember. I vividly remember being like, "Oh, cool, another metal tour!" Like,
yeah, right.
I mean, I don't mean that wrong. I love it and I appreciate it, respect it, but it was just like I can't even differentiate. So I think let's go back to when we first met. I think I met you guys when I booked you guys in Wichita. I think it was the Eagles Lodge. maybe with those Sleeper and a couple other bands, probably some headlining shows and stuff. My memory's terrible, but yeah. Do you remember any of that time or kind of?
Yeah. I mean, like I was telling you before, like I have a pretty rough memory compared to the other guys in the band. Just I feel like they remember so much more detail than I do from back in the tour days. But we were playing so many shows, like especially early on in the band, like we're doing over 200, close to 300 shows a year, which is insane. And we had nowhere to go, so we just had to keep playing shows and stay on the road. But yeah, so a lot of it in my mind kind of blends together, especially if it was like a place that we would play continually or working with the same promoter a bunch of times. So that is certainly something that doesn't help my memory side of things. But I will say I do remember, of course I remember hanging out and being at shows with you back in the day. I mean, you were one of our favorite dudes to work with. And like, that was the cool thing in the band too, is that we had such a tight knit group of like people that would keep bringing us out on tours, even if it was just the headliner or if we were supporting for somebody else. We would always look forward to those shows. And I remember looking forward to your show specifically because like we know we're going to get treated well, and that doesn't happen at every single show. But you brought up O Sleeper, and we did a bunch of tours with O Sleeper in a bunch of different capacities. But Kansas was always on the route.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I vaguely remember it is the short answer. Don't remember too many details other than just playing a million shows,
dude. Totally
for years.
Isn't Shane from O Sleeper doing inspections too?
Dude, he is. Yeah. So it's kind of neat because we kind of like got going at the same time, but we kept like topping each other. Like I was studying, then he was like, "Oh, tell me more about that?" And then he studied and got his license before me, and then he started his company, and then I got my license and I started hiring on. He's like, "Oh crap!" And so like we keep pushing each other, but like he's a great inspector, I can tell. And each state is very different with home inspection. Like they have their own rules. So like Texas in particular is pretty strict and stringent compared to Tennessee, even though we still have regulations and requirements and stuff like that and licensing. And but yeah, he's adhering to a whole different set of rules than I am, even in Tennessee. But it's really cool to see him do that kind of stuff. But I've definitely called him in the middle of an inspection, be like, "Dude, what do you think about this?" So it's really neat. Yeah, it's if you're especially if you have a background in any type of like construction or contracting, or if you're just a smart person that can read and do your research, then it's a great job. Yep. I'm sure he's good at it.
Absolutely. Sweet. Well, let's go back a little bit. Tell me, for Blake, growing up, what was the family like? What was it? Music in your life, kind of your influences and stuff. And let's go from there.
Cool. Okay. So my dad was a worship pastor for decades and decades, ever since I was a baby. Yeah, I mean, so I grew up in church. I was a pastor's kid, which came with its own fun scenarios, But yeah, I mean, I grew up until I was 10 in North Carolina, and then we moved to Arkansas because my dad took on a different church. And then that's where I lived till I was 18 and moved to Nashville. But so growing up, I mean, since my dad was a worship pastor, I don't want to say I was musically inclined, but I was surrounded by music certainly all the time. And so I played like trumpet in middle school band all the way through high school. And I didn't love it. It was fine, but I was really into drums. Like I remember my dad bought me my first drum kit when I was probably, 15. And that was like, that just changed my world. I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, I want to play drums. So, as soon as I could start kind of playing a beat and getting my feel for it, he let me play in church. It was a big deal because it was a pretty conservative church. Had never had drums in it before. So I really owe a big thanks to my dad for because he probably got some talking tos, after the service, you brought drums in the service. So especially because I was probably terrible. I had to not be good when I first played. So that was kind of the genesis of me just getting into music and just starting to be, pretty much obsessed with it at that point. And then by the end of high school, my parents got me an acoustic guitar to where I could kind of start learning chords and playing worship songs. And in high school, I would like lead worship and youth group and that kind of stuff. And I also worked at a Christian bookstore where, dude, and like, there was only like 4 people that worked there, and I was the youngest. And so the lady that owned it put me in charge of like basically stocking the music section, CDs and stuff, which that opened a whole new world for me, because it was Facedown and Tooth and Nail and Solid State and all these, edgy bands that I didn't even know existed. So, immediately got into like Project 86 and Living Sacrifice and Norma Jean and Spoken was big because it was in Arkansas and they were from that area. So like, and Sacrifice, of course, playing at Vino's in Little Rock. I remember hearing about those shows growing up. So like that just blew my mind. And my best friend Jeremy at the time had an electric guitar, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. So he showed me how to, what a distortion pedal was and a metal zone pedal. Like, it was like, oh my gosh, this is the heaviest thing I've ever heard. This is so cool. And like, you hear somebody scream. I remember listening to Project 86 Drawing Black Lines, and a part where Schwab screams on it. I was like, it sounds like he's ripping his throat out. How did I do that? Like, it's insane. So I love that kind of stuff. And it never stopped after that. Like I got so into it. I just wanted to learn everything on guitar and drums, really. But started getting into that. So college, fast forward a couple of years later, I went to Bible college for 1 year in Nashville, and then went 30 minutes south to MTSU, Middle Tennessee State. And that is where I saw a flyer in one of the buildings somewhere on campus that was like, do you want to be in a heavy Christian rock / metal band? Influences, Project 86, Living Sacrifice, Spoken. I was like, yes, I do. So I took the number off that, and that was John Juan. That's our bass player. So I met him and his roommate Dustin at the time, which were all still good buddies still. And they were wanting to start a band, and they needed a drummer. I was like, I can do it. Who knows if I can do it? I don't know. I just said yes. So got to know those guys, and they have been like brothers and some of my best friends I've ever had ever since. And so we started playing music. We started a band called Silas in college, and played like, we all went to the same church, so we'd like go do youth retreats and play shows at these youth retreats and stuff like that. And it's just kind of cut our teeth feeling what it was like to be on a stage, being loud and not good, but it didn't matter. We were having a blast. Yeah. So after that, we kind of just stopped playing under that name, and John and I wanted to keep playing. So we started A Plea For Purging and brought on Lyle, our first guitar player, who is my brother-in-law who works at that other brewery. Oh, okay. He's my wife's brother. And that's kind of how I met her too, because I started hanging out with Lyle and their family at church and playing music. But anyway, all that to say, so John and I brought on Lyle. So it's me, John, Lyle. We had a dude playing drums at the time named Richie. And that was more of like, I was like singing and screaming, playing guitar at the same time. So it's pretty new metal, to be quite honest. And then we wanted to go heavier. We're like, dude, we want to play like real metal, like screaming metal. So at the time, I don't know if you remember this, but Zambui, do you remember Zambui? Yeah, like the big thing online. Like, they had the funniest videos. They were just a merch company, but they would, go and sponsor and host all these big shows at Rocketown, a lot of metal, a lot of solid state bands. And Andy was one of the hosts or whatever on their, I don't know, everything they filmed, Andy would be on there, like interviewing bands and stuff like that. We just thought he was so cool. But we knew he was in a band called With Blood Comes Beauty at the time. And I remember like, we'd see him at shows, and I'd just be begging, dude, please join our band. Like, we really want it like a screamer. We want to be like a heavy band. He's like, nah, dude, I can't do it. I have like a job and stuff. Like, okay, cool. So this other dude named Justin, who is on our very first EP as our first vocalist, which there were recordings with me screaming on those songs before we actually recorded that EP. So I was a frontman for a little while, but never released anything screaming. But this Justin Lewis is his name. He came along. We recorded that first EP, started playing shows around town and kind of regionally. I think we did some stuff in Kentucky. And then Justin quit, and Russell Dickerson, who's now like a famous country star. Yeah,
he's playing here. I just saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, he was our front man for a little while too, and he did our first tour actually on a spring break tour early on, like I think it was like 2005 or something like that, maybe 6. And then he quit, and Andy got in a car wreck like the same week. He's like, okay, I'm going to quit my job. Like, I'm ready to tour again and be in a band. So I finally convinced him after a couple years to scream in our band. And so Andy joined the band at that point. And then we wrote and recorded that second EP and just hit the road. And we just played a crap ton of shows, as many as we could get on for free or just gas money or whatever. And that is what caught the attention of Jason at Facedown. So that's when we got picked up there and started putting out full lengths.
That's awesome. Were you playing? Obviously, you were playing with other bands, but were bands taking notice of you guys? Were you guys, becoming friends with some of the Facedown bands or the Solid State bands?
Yeah, a little bit. It was. I think more so similar bands of similar size from other areas, us doing it all together. Like, for example, like Once Nothing and Gwen Stacy, like we were all just getting started touring and figuring out what that was like and being on the road. And so like we would always, hey, we'll come up to Pittsburgh and play a few shows in that area with Once Nothing, and then they'll come down south and play with us. And then Within was a band that was on a Facedown imprint label. We got to be buddies with them from the Chattanooga area. So we'd go to like, East Tennessee and the Southeast region and play shows with them. And so it was kind of like we would link up with these different bands. Usually we'd meet them on MySpace too, which is really funny. But similar sized bands in other areas that were kind of trying to do the same thing we were doing. And we'd almost like bring each other out and do little runs together and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, we got to play some cool shows. I think there was one show we played to like maybe 10 people with A Day to Remember in Memphis. And they were like, oh, you guys, we're about to release our first record on Victor. You should come play our show in Florida. And we're like, oh, that's too far. We can't afford that. We're so stupid. So that was funny. Yeah. I mean, over the years, of course, we made friends with a lot of people, and it was a fun time, man. I mean, we didn't have a dollar to our name, but it was exciting, man.
That's amazing.
It really was, Yeah.
That's incredible. I definitely, looking on the other side of the coin, I was exciting for me, like I get it. Like it was just really cool to see these dudes doing their thing, just being a part of something that changed people's lives. That's really cool,
That's crazy to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it really, really, really just, it's just it was an incredible time for music for sure. Let's go back to the Facedown thing. I know you said Jason was interested. Kind of tell me how that materialized and kind of how did he come see you play, or like how did that kind of go down?
Yeah, so Andy probably was more of the guy that listened to like old school hardcore or like more Facedown type bands through the years than the other guy. I knew what Facedown was, of course, and a lot of the bands. But Andy was like, holy crap, that would be like a dream for me. And I remember him saying that. And I think that our approach at the time was like, hey, let's kind of act like we don't need a label at all. Let's just do our thing, and we can record it. Like Aaron and I both had audio engineering degrees at that point. And Aaron had some gear. So it's like, we can just record our own stuff. And there were companies at the time that you could just print your own CDs and take them to shows and sell them. Like, it was pretty simple, there were avenues for you to do that. So I remember just being like, hey, let's just kind of act like we don't need a label. And I think that would put us in a better position if one does come along. And that's what happened. I mean, we were touring so much and still releasing new music. And I think that caught the eye of Jason, and he just reached out, and, we talked over maybe a few months kind of thing and what our plans were for the band. And, I think Andy was kind of the point man for him and Jason to talk. But I remember Jason flying out to a Nashville show. And at the time, I'll say this, Nashville was insane. It was just a crazy moment in like kind of Christian-y, kind of heavy music in Nashville, because we had Rocket Town, which was such a cool venue. Yeah. And we considered our home venue. And so at the time, we would have there were some local bands here in Nashville along with us that we could play a local show and have 1,000 people at. That's insane to me, for that kind of music, especially. So we kind of had like a built-in home crowd, which is really cool. And so I remember Jason be like, okay, well, I want to fly out and see one of these Nashville shows. I want to see you in your element. Like, heck yeah. So he came out and the show bombed. Like, it was like, I think it may be the worst Nashville show we'd ever played or something. I mean, maybe like 40 people or so.
Oh,
you know, I think it was a promoter issue, and like they didn't do any promotion. And we, you know, I don't remember the circumstances. We may have played Nashville like, you know, a month or two before or something. I don't really remember. Other than just the show bombing, we're like, oh, he is never going to sign us. Like, no way.
That's hysterical.
So yeah, anyway, he I guess he was into it, and we just immediately hit it off with Jason. Though him and his wife Virginia are just some of the most genuine, awesome, loving, caring, good people in the industry, and we all feel that way in the band. Like, it was just immediate. Like, these people get us and let us do our thing, and they just want us to succeed and to enable us to do that. And they really just care about us as people, which is huge.
Yeah.
And so, and honestly, their record deal was above and beyond what any other label would have offered us at the time, especially. So, just really good people. So yeah, caught his attention, said, all right, let's do a full length. And so we went and recorded and released definitely our worst record we've ever done. The very first record on Facedown. So we don't like how it sounds. The songwriting is just not our thing anymore. And so looking back, of course, hindsight's 2020. It's kind of like, I wish we'd have done something different, but it is what it is. It gave us something to tour on and kind of cut our teeth on what it was like to release a full length. And ever since, Jason has just been the coolest dude ever. Him and Virginia both have been just so supportive. So yeah, 4 full lengths on Facedown with some vinyl releases, a little 7-inch of Fat Bride. But yeah, he's awesome. I mean, I literally still talk to him like, you know, a few times a year just to catch up.
That seems like the normal response from everyone. That's really cool. I love hearing that.
Him and Virginia are great. They live in Hawaii now too, so I keep trying to figure out.
That's what I heard.
To go see them. Yeah.
That's cool. Real quick on a side note question, was there any other labels interested in you guys at that time as well, or was it just primarily Facedown?
I feel like I remember whispers, or maybe a couple of them reaching out to Andy at the time. I don't know if much of them came to fruition in terms of actual offers, but I think there were some feelers out there from other labels. But I mean, you know, and at the time, a few of them had pretty bad reputations in terms of like, you know, they'd barely give you any money. You would never recoup no matter how many records you sold, kind of thing. And it's just kind of like, man, like, yeah, our band maybe possibly could be a bit bigger on this label here, but we definitely would probably hate working with them. You know, who knows if they're good people, and 2, we would never recoup or make anything money-wise on top of that. So it's kind of like Facedown was the obvious choice to us based on how we gelled with Jason and Virginia.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
very cool. Well, let's go over some of the records and just kind of some stories or thoughts or something in the recording or something. I know you just mentioned it was your first record was probably not your favorite, but let's go over a critique of Mind and Thought and just kind of maybe any stories from that time in the recording. I know you didn't love it, obviously, but what do you remember primarily about it?
I mean, selfishly, like from my perspective, I remember just playing the crap out of my whammy bar on the guitar, just so many dive bombs, and like that was really fun. That was a fun thing to do, you know, during that era of the band. I loved that part of it. The touring, man, we just toured. I think there was one year we did over 300 dates a year, which is just
nuts,
insane. And that's what I remember, just working our butts off. And I remember taking, you know, promo pictures for Facedown's announcement that they signed us, and it was just like in this kid's backyard. We're just look like crap, you know. We hadn't showered in like 2 weeks or something. But it was just we were just getting started, you know. We knew we wanted to do it full time. We were excited to release a full length that gave us something to tour on. And the show and tour offers got a little bit bigger, which were still very minuscule, but it was still like you saw like upward trajectory. I remember thinking, this is really exciting, because I never even thought I would release something on a CD on a record label. That's crazy, you know. Like see your CD in a store. That, you know, every dude in every band from that era would probably say the same thing. But I remember just there was like a buzz about it. Like it was just really exciting. We were just trying everything we could musically to figure out, you know, how to keep doing what we were doing and growing. And But I will say towards the end of that record cycle, our attitudes definitely got a little more jaded, and obviously our sound got a little heavier going into Depravity because we were kind of exposed to some of the darker sides of like being on the road full time. You know, the effect it would have on your relationships at home, the effect it would have on your relationships within the band, even. It was just like, okay, this isn't all like cotton candy and rainbows, you know, like when you've been doing this for 2 or 3 years full time to that extent, like we were. I mean, we were literally homeless. We were crashing on friends and girlfriends' floors when we were home, kind of thing. So the early part of that record cycle was really exciting and really, really fun. That's what I remember. And honestly, like, you know, we knock on that record and the recording and the songs and all that stuff, but guitar wise, that stuff was fun to play. It was like real life Guitar Hero. Like at the time I was super into like X-Toll and Dragon Force, you know, like I love that like harmony, fast picking kind of stuff. And I got fixated on it, and that's what just came out with Plea. And so it was a natural thing at that point to be playing that kind of music. But it was fun. It was really fun to play. So that's what I remember from the record. And we, it's crazy. The dude from Whitechapel, Phil, is on that record, which is really funny because it's not like a heavy record, but he does like a breakdown on it. And it's by far like 10 times the heaviest part of the record. So that was cool. Yeah,
that's awesome. Was Facedown stoked on it when you turned it in, or were they pumped on it?
I don't remember thinking that Jason was like overly excited about it. I don't think he said anything like negative or anything like that. He's just kind of like, oh, okay, here we go. Throw it out, you know, like, you know, that kind of thing. Another funny tidbit about this is that there are at least 2 or 3 songs on the full length that were on the EP before that we self-released.
Okay.
So I'm gonna hit allow on the Skype thing. Hopefully it doesn't kick me off. Okay. So I remember like calling Jason to be like, can we add one more song from the last EP on this new recording? Cause like, you know, we're like, you know, 9 songs in, we need another song. We've only got like a week until we go to the studio. Like we need a song. I remember doing that. So I think Jason had already heard a handful of those songs from the EP beforehand too, before he signed us. So it probably either way wouldn't have been super new or exciting for him.
Yeah.
And I'll say this too, like a shout out to War of Ages, because they were like the you know, not senior band, but you know what I mean? They were like, they had been on the label for a while, put out some records, and they were shredders, man. Like they could play. And so like we play shows, then like, I want to play like that. So like they were a pretty big influence because they were a Facedown band and kind of guitar driven. And so I will say that too. Like, so we kind of maybe subconsciously tried to get in that vein with Jason as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder what the other guys would say about that. I'd be interested to hear.
What's your favorite song from that record?
Oh gosh. While the Sparrow Sleeps, maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's my favorite.
I think that was like kind of the single, maybe.
Yeah.
And we didn't do a video on that record. Thank goodness. I would say I remember playing that one live and just enjoying playing that one live.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, I hate to say it, but I mean, fans really didn't latch on to one particular song on that record, and that usually kind of helps band dudes decide what's their favorite song, whatever is most fun to play live, at least for our band. That was totally the deciding factor. So nobody really latched onto too many songs on that record. We were pretty eager to put out something else.
Yeah. How long after that did you do Depravity?
Probably about a year and a half. Let's see, 2008. Yeah, I mean, we started writing within the year. Because I remember shortly after the first record coming out, we went to Aaron's parents' house in Montgomery, Alabama, and recorded 2 new songs, which would have been Motives and Prevaricator, which were by far like the heaviest songs we had ever written. Yeah. We had tuned down, like I was experimenting with tuning down a little bit. Because in the first record, we were just in drop D. And then I remember I love Seven Dust. They're like one of my favorite bands ever. And like they play in drop D. I want to try something of that tuning. So like tuned down to drop D and wrote those 2 songs with Aaron and recorded like demos of those songs. We're like, okay, we want to sound like this. This is heavier. It's more fun to play even.
Yeah.
and we think it would get more response, and it would just kind of check all the boxes for us. So those two songs were the genesis of us writing Depravity and going a little bit darker, heavier direction.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely within a year, we were eyeballing the next record.
Yeah. And so with that one, any thoughts or, I mean, obviously it's a more aggressive approach on this record. So like what was the vibe like? I know you said you were starting to get jaded. So it obviously came out in the music.
Yeah, I mean, jaded's, I feel like, a strong word at that point for us. It was more about like, crap, man, like I'm tired of eating Taco Bell every day. We not that money is everything. We never really cared about that, but it was just like, we've been so poor for so long. It's just like you can start to feel the effects of it at that point. Yeah, a little bit. So, and like I said before, it puts a strain on relationships within and outside the band. And I think that pressure started to take its toll on the writing. And so the darker stuff felt a little more natural, writing it at that point than it would have a year or two before that. John's parents at the time had a house on Kentucky Lake with a basement, like a finished basement in it. And so they let us, which is huge thank you to them. We love all our family so much, but John's parents let us go basically live in this like apartment basement to write Depravity and record and pre-pro the entire record front to back. So that's where Aaron and I kind of buckled down and wrote that record. And the isolation too was a thing, because it's kind of like, well, if you're not touring, you're not making gas to go anywhere. So we were stuck like out in the woods on this lake, which was beautiful. It sounds terrible. Yeah. You're on a lake for like a month and a half or whatever. It was amazing, but it was also like, man, I miss like my girlfriend, my friend. Yeah, my family. It's like, man, you start to feel like you're in a cave every day, So, and at the time, Lyle, our first guitar player, had left the band, and we brought in Tyler at that point to help a little bit with writing and recording. And so we were also rehearsing with him most days, trying to get him up to speed. And so that's what I remember from that era too. But yeah, it was kind of like, oh, we lost our first member too. So it's kind of like, okay, we got to recalibrate a little bit, which is so funny to think about now. But at the time it was a little, it jarred you a little bit, it's like, it's our life. So I remember that part of it too. But that all played into the writing on that record a little bit. And I know we were just really excited. And I do remember Jason being pretty excited about the direction of that record, being like, ooh, this is heavy. This is exciting. This is new. Sounds different, the recording is going to be much better, which was a huge plus for us. And I remember he was really pumped about that. And then we put up the first song, which I think was Malevolence. We made Malevolence first. That's
a banger.
So which is historically our biggest song still to this day, probably. And then, I think that we were so eager to get back out on the road and play these new songs. That was really fun and a good reprieve from being in a cave and writing that kind of music for a while. So we were excited to get back on the road, and we filmed like the dumbest music video ever for it, which felt good because it was like, okay, it's a heavy record. It's a dark record, but this would be a fun thing to do, kind of get the comic relief side of it. And had a really good time doing that. And that was Andy Reel that did that. He lives here in town too, so I get to see him.
I don't know him, but I know who he is.
Good dude. Which I don't know if he's proud of that work in particular, but he does really, really cool stuff. Way That's cooler than that now.
Isn't he doing a podcast with Stephen Keach?
They're buddies for sure. I saw whispers of that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a cool time, man. That Depravity is really fun. That we saw a pretty sharp increase in like the quality of shows and tours and stuff like that. And then we were still being able to like pack out shows at home, which meant a lot to us. We would just look forward to Nashville shows, every time we played, because it was so fun. It was like our people. So
what's who produced that one? I didn't even.
So Joey Sturgis.
Oh, okay. He was the hot guy at the time, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he was basically recording in like a not heated garage, in what was it, Indiana or Illinois? Oh gosh, that's terrible. I don't remember
one of the eyes
up north. And I remember just snow and ice being on the ground, and I mean the space was like It was just a thrown together home studio, but Joey had such an ear, he can make it sound super good. And he was coming off the heels of like Devil Wears Prada and their success on their first or second record, maybe. And so we're like, dude, we want to record with him. Like, he can make it sound super clean, super heavy, super clear. So that was a journey for sure, because it was like we'd be freezing cold trying to like record guitars, and they won't stay in tune because it's freezing in here, like that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was the recording. He engineered, mixed, and mastered the whole thing, and it sounded great. And he did the engineering for the next record too, Marriage, but Brian Hood ended up mixing and mastering that one and reamping some of the guitars and things like that. But yeah, Joey had he was the guy front to back on Depravity.
Yeah, I remember seeing his name on everyone's records at that time. He's really talented. That's awesome. That's really cool. Sweet. So, any with the Depravity touring and stuff, do you remember anything from that time, or do you remember any like big tours you guys were on at all, or anything? Obviously you would play the Facedown Fest every year and whatnot, but was there any shows that you were just like, holy crap, this is insane?
Well, I mean, Cornerstone was always like the thing we looked forward to every summer for sure. And even like before Depravity came out, Cornerstone was like, oh, that is like the Mecca. Yeah. And so I remember it was like when we also got roped into the Sunshine crowd in Minnesota and being able to go play that festival, that was like, holy crap, like we're playing like real stages with real bands. Like, it's so
real
cool.
Microphone.
Yeah. So it's like, that was really cool. I don't know. I mean, we had just never played to those size crowds before. And if we did, it was such a rarity,
Sure.
So I do remember being like, holy crap, we're like playing to like people, like a lot of people.
They have catering and they have food.
Right. Yeah. I'm still sleeping in a tent or sleeping in a van, but I don't care, we're getting to eat. That I remember that, summers were so fun. And I know that during the Depravity cycle, we ventured out a bit further out of our comfort zone as far as regions. I mean, we went, into Canada. Wow. Crossing the board. That's crazy to think that my stupid little band was like taking me, quote unquote, international. It's like, holy crap. We're in like New England for a tour, and like we went out to California. That was exciting too. It was like, holy crap, we're doing this. So we're making it all the way to the West Coast playing shows. Like that's pretty exciting. And that's kind of when we got roped into the Sleeping Giant crowd and then Pending Doom, and got to meet those guys and a lot of the California crew. From Facedown and Death Star and that kind of stuff. So that was a really cool time. We were getting to do a lot of new things touring wise. And that's what I remember more so than the specific shows other than Cornerstone and Sunshine.
Yeah. Very cool. So after Depravity, obviously that was a success for you guys. How long after that was Marriage of Heaven and Hell? Like kind of, were you getting even more, not quote unquote jaded? Where was your headspace at that point? Like what's what the direction of that record?
Yeah, it's hard. It's awkward to talk about that era because I know for a fact, like the four core dudes in the band, which Tyler's still considered part of our band. He's like a brother to us, but like the four guys, me and Andy and Tyler and Aaron and John, us four, we kind of let our cynicism kind of take over, I think, a little bit, and to where we got exposed to some of the stuff behind the scenes that, like, holy crap, like being in a Christian metalcore band was pretty lucrative. Let's be honest at the time, and it could be very lucrative. And so we were exposed to a lot of things that were like, whoa, this doesn't feel right at all. Yeah. But like now it's like I can't relate to that now in my life. It's kind of like I can't. It's weird to sing these songs, and Andy's even talked about it, where it's hard to relate to these lyrics that we wrote so long ago, 10 years ago or whatever. Longer than that, because gosh, 12 years ago. Because it's something that like it's just like, who cares, But at the time, it was once again part of our daily life. We were touring every day. We were playing shows every day, and a lot of them were with the same bands over and over in different scenarios, different festivals, different tours. So, some of the things that we were seeing between, other bands or other dudes on stage and what they were kind of portraying versus what we were seeing on the road or backstage or whatever that was. And by the way, probably projecting a little bit because we were guilty of some of that crap too. I'm sure, it's like, it's like it was pot calling the kettle black maybe a little bit, but we were just so done with it because we almost like took offense to it because it's like, man, you're taking advantage of these kids, like a lot of them being like youth group kids that like want a safe space and something real, something to experience on a real level, come to these shows. And it's usually the shows that it's the only show their parents would allow them to go to because it was Christian. So it was like, man, that's a really cool idea. And then you see that opportunity be abused in a lot of ways, whether it's venues or promoters or bands or whoever, people. It's just people. Yeah. So that really got to us, man. And I think at that point was like, no, I'm kind of done. I'm kind of done with that crap. We're not going to put Jesus' face on a t-shirt and try to upsell that thing. And we're not going to market that side of us because it just feels kind of icky to us.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
So we kind of we ran in a different opposite direction and said, "Oh, your God is dead." That's the first line of one of the songs. Like, okay, so that was kind of the trajectory for us at that point. So yeah, I think we were pretty cynical, pretty jaded, and we were tired, man. And it was pretty dramatic during that time too. But I'll say this, another compliment to Jason in Virginia. We were definitely a little nervous to hand over that material to Jason. Hey, your God is dead. That's literally the first line of Van Weep. I'm sorry. We said some pretty rough stuff on that that was considered rough at the time. Very, salacious. So, but Jason rolled with it, man. Very nice. Yeah, kind of. It was like out of the norm for a Christian metalcore band to do something like that. So on one hand, I was proud of that. On the other hand, it was kind of like, oh, everyone's gonna hate us. So and it was a mixed bag of reactions.
Yeah, I was gonna say, sure. How did they react? What did they say?
Well, Jason was like, dude, I get what you're doing. I love it. Let's do it. And it was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, and that was just another respect for Jason because he like saw our hearts about it and didn't, didn't rake us over the coals about it. But I mean, as far as bands, it was a mixed bag. There were some people that were super offended by it. And then other people that were like, yo, you're right. This is awesome. Like, I love what you're doing, So, there were definitely people that felt the same as we did, which was a cool surprise, I think. But yeah, it feels goofy to talk about it nowadays in my going into my 40s, but yeah, I mean, it was, dude, Christian metalcore, I'll say that too. And Nashville and Rocketown played into this too. But during that time, as that like set of years of like Christian-y heavy music was so popular. Like we were fortunate. I'll say this too. Like I'm thankful because we were fortunate to be a part of something that like, I don't want to say the success, but at least the viability of being a band in that scene was kind of built in. If you could play some breakdowns, and get the cornerstone, you were going to have a good time and play fun shows. And that's not the case nowadays. Like it's so different. Totally. And we were just fortunate to strike while the iron was hot a little bit is what I'm saying. So like, on one hand, I'm also very thankful for that scene or whatever during that time. Yeah. Cause it helped us.
Was that at that point were you guys just, since you were jaded and on the road and all this, were you starting to be like, is this what I want to do anymore? Or were you starting to feel like, hey, a real job sounds attractive? Was that kind of, in the minds at that point, or were you still like, we still need to do this? Like
maybe a little bit. And you're probably talking to like the most pessimistic dude in the band too, because like the other guys I would say tend to be a little bit more positive or encouraging than I was. I was always just a tortured artist trying to write heavy music on my guitar, that kind of guy. But like maybe a little bit. I think that what kind of helped keep all of that stuff at bay, at least in my mind, was that we were seeing like little increments of like quote unquote success. So like, that was like, man, that helped us keep going. Sure. We going into marriage for sure, we got to do a European tour after marriage came out. I remember that was like that was a dream come true for me. Bar none. That was a dream come true. The fact that we were doing that just still to this day is like, man, that I love that. That's like one of my favorite things that I've ever gotten to experience. But what point of me saying that is just to say that those little tidbits of like success kept you going a little bit. I do remember
the little hits.
Yeah, I mean, it mattered. And I think that changed our minds a little bit, because up to that point, we were like, we play as many shows as we can every year. Every tour we say yes to, we do it all. And at that point, it was like, wait a minute, maybe this isn't like the best business decision or the smartest thing for our mental health or emotional health or for our relationships at home to just tour all the time. So maybe we need to be just a little bit more selective about tours and shows. And like, if this tour doesn't get us into a new market or we're not playing to a new crowd, then we're just kind of spinning our wheels a little bit. And so I remember at the time being like, oh crap, like maybe we need to start trying to be a little smarter about how we do this band. I think that was a factor too. So it's, not super jaded. It was, we were kind of done with some of the politics behind everything, but at the same time, we still love playing music and playing shows and writing. That was still exciting for sure. I think we were just trying to mature a little bit.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, at that age, it makes sense why one would feel that way and then get to that conclusion, where you're like, whoa, we are spinning our wheels. Like, what's the point, to a point, So,
yeah.
What, on that European, who did you tour with on that European tour?
So it was a German band headlining called War from a Harlot's Mouth. And they're freaking amazing. I mean, they're like real musicians for sure. Salt the Wound was on that tour as well. If you remember them being around, and they were support as well. Who else? I have to go look at this tour laminate. I have it on my wall. I think there was somebody else on the tour. Hang on, this is so terrible. Oh yeah, duh. I'm so stupid. We shared a freaking Sprinter van with Arson's Get All the Girls, and those dudes were hilarious.
I booked them once.
So fun, dude. And it was funny because it was like, I don't know, like a 13-seater Sprinter van, and we had 14 guys in the van. Wow. So it was like somebody always had to be in the like bunk up top kind of thing. And it was in February and it was freezing cold.
I bet.
I mean, we spun out on ice on the Autobahn on that. I mean, it was a wild tour. And then Tyler quit afterwards. Like this is brutal. It's like, I can't do this. It was, the amenities were so bad.
Oh my gosh.
And we were the opener of that tour. And so we came back in like major debt. I'll tell you a quick story if you want to hear this one too.
Yeah, sure.
This is no joke. We're driving through the Swiss Alps, like snow-covered mountains, and we're going through this mountain pass, 2 Sprinter vans in a row, 2 bands in each van. And we turn this corner and the Swiss Polizei pull us over, and like we take this weird like turn back into this compound, and it looks like World War II, like Nazi Germany, like concrete, like huge concrete slab, huge, with these buildings on either side of it. And they're like every piece of gear, every piece of luggage out of the van, line up in a row. And we're like, oh my God, like we're this is it. I'm going to die today.
Oh my God.
So I snuck a video. I think I have it on YouTube somewhere, but I snuck a video of us at that point. And I was just like, what the heck is happening? Had to pull all our gear out. Tour manager was trying to reason with them, and like it wasn't happening. And they went down the line and chose the 2 most tattooed dudes. One of them being the guitar player for Salt the Wind, Jake. He had like neck tattoos.
Oh, I remember him. Yeah,
tattoos on his face. They were like, you come with us. And like an hour and a half later, they're like, they start walking back to the group, like with heads down, like what happened? They got strip searched, and so they were looking for drugs. And the 2 dudes, they chose the only 2 guys that were straight edge on the tour just because they had tattoos.
That's incredible.
So they finally were like, okay, pack the vans back up. You owe us €700 each van because you're over the weight limit. We're like, you didn't even weigh anything. Like, what do you think? So they were going to get something from us. And that's one of the reasons we came back in debt from that tour, because we were the opener, which means we got paid the least amount.
Yeah.
We didn't sell as much merch as the other guys because they had all toured Europe before. And so we came home, we're like, we need to book a couple big shows to pay this debt. Because how we came back in debt was we had to, because of gas splits and all that stuff, our cost for the tour, I had to pay the tour manager at the end of the tour. And then the merch company, the German merch company who had printed this merch, came to collect at the last show, and I didn't have any money. So I was like, dude, I will pay you. Like, we always pay our debts. We were very like financially legit. We were like compared to other bands, I feel like. So anyway, I had to promise this German dude that we would pay him. He was like, I have people in the States that will find you. Like, I know. I was like, no problem. I was like, I'll get you your money. And sure enough, we paid it off pretty quick. But it was like, that was a wild ride. That was a wild ride.
That sounds That sounds nuts.
Yeah.
So after Marriage in Heaven, how long after that was Life and Death, and I guess the end of Plea? Kind of how did that materialize? Obviously, you've talked about, kind of the band unraveling in some ways, in shape or form. So kind of what was the next step with that and into that next record?
So going into that last record, Tyler had quit. And at that point, I kind of decided, like, I've been writing everything pretty much from the beginning of the band with Aaron. Let's figure out a way to tour with one guitar player, just me, for a multitude of reasons. So we're sad that Tyler left, for sure. And we were also digging in a little bit more at home as far as home life. Like, I had bought a little house. The other guys, had either bought houses or signed leases on apartments, and we were home a lot more during that time because we were trying to be a little bit more selective about the touring.
Yeah.
So we were kind of digging a little bit more at home. And so that was a new dynamic. I think we were growing up really fast at that point too. It's like, we've just been touring for years. Like, we're tired. We want to write heavy music. We want it to be a little bit more mature sound and not just breakdowns all the time. And so our musical, we were kind of tired, I think, of some heavy music to where it was like we were inundated with it for so long. It was like we want to explore some other sounds and layers and textures and all that. Especially me with electronic stuff. I was super, which I still am, super into that kind of stuff. So we were home a lot. So we wrote that record at home, and that was the first time we'd ever done that. Like, I remember going to Aaron's house in town a few times a week to work through some stuff, and we were sending files to each other. We'd never done that. We'd always kind of just been all together, working through material. And this was the first time it was kind of like I'm in my house and he's in his, and even though we're in the same town, we're kind of fleshing out material that way. So it was a time more of growth and change, I think, for us personally and within the band. And the material came out at the time. I remember thinking, like, this isn't heavy enough for, like, our core fans, maybe. But also we didn't care. I think we were just kind of like, it's going to be what it is. And we had done Josh Schroeder, who did our last record up in Michigan. He had done a cover for us, Big Papa. We did a cover of Big Papa.
Oh, yeah.
And he recorded it. And I remember thinking, like, this dude is legit. Like, I love his approach to producing and engineering. So we were really excited about the recording process on Marriage. And so, or not Marriage, Life and Death. So going into that last record, we wanted it to be a lot more organic, a lot more representative of us instead of like digital plugins and like amp modeling and sampled drums. We wanted like, hey, I want to put our instruments on this record because these songs are going to be a lot more organic and maybe not as quote unquote heavy. So that was really exciting. Went to Michigan and recorded, and those are Aaron's drums on the record. Those are my heads, my cabs, my guitars, my pedals on that record. And another thing that's cool about that record, which I don't know if a whole lot of people know this, but to my knowledge, there is no digital reverb or any room noise on that record that's not natural. I'm going to ignore this call. Sorry.
It's okay.
I should have turned my work line off.
Busy man. You're a busy man.
So what I'm saying is, like, for example, Andy would do a vocal take. Where's my?
There you are. There you were.
In my back. Yeah. Sorry. So I get what I'm trying to describe is Andy would do like a vocal take, and then he or finish a song, and then after we left the studio, Josh would put speakers in his garage and play the vocal track through the speakers with a mic on the other end of the room. And that mic would pick up the reverberations from that room. And he would put that back into the session and stretch it out or manipulate it and make that like the reverb for his vocal, as opposed to like a plug-in, a digital kind of model.
Oh, cool.
Thing.
Very cool.
So that I love that organic approach to that last record. That was one of my favorite parts of that recording process. And Josh, like, to this day is like a good friend of ours. We just hit it off with him and his wife, and we grill out like, you know, multiple times a week and just hang out and not just work on music. And it was a really special time, and it felt like we were all kind of reconnecting with life a lot more than we had previously. So yeah, it was a really good time. I enjoyed that process probably the most.
What's your favorite song from that record, and I guess any stories on the final tour, if you will, or the ending of the band?
So okay, before I answer that, I gotta tell you, I just have to say it because the guys fought me on this for years. I think Golden Barriers off of Marriage, the record before it, is one of the coolest songs that Aaron and I have ever written. I love that song.
That's a great song.
But it never caught on live. Every now and then I'll get somebody mentioning it, but I think we tried to play it on a couple tours. It just never really took off, but I freaking love that song. That's probably my favorite song off Marriage.
Yeah.
As far as Life and Death, I remember, here's an honorable mention, like my song, the title of my song, which is Andy talking about his mom and kind of everything, and his dad and everything he had gone through in the year or two before that record, which is really heavy life stuff. I remember like writing the music for that and listening to Andy's lyrics, being like, dude, this is like one of the most personal songs we have ever written. And it's like Andy, my best friend, you know, who's gone through this stuff. It just meant a lot. I think that was a really emotional song for all of us to hear him do that. That was really cool.
That's cool.
And sad and awful, but also really cool, you know?
Cathartic.
So that's honorable mention for sure. Let me think about that. So Music City had a lot of nostalgia for us too, because that's all about Nashville. There's a whole part where Andy lists off all our friends' bands.
I remember that part. Yeah. That's cool.
That is really neat. You know, I think, let's see. I'm going to go look at this track listing because I have stuff on my wall. Man, I think.
Your platinum records.
Yeah, right. I wish. Dude, I think Room for the Dead is pretty sick too. I mean, Heart of a Child, I really like that opening riff. And I really like that. Okay, all right, final answer. The Life. I like The Life a lot. I think that opening riff is really fun to play, and even that kind of chill bridge in that where it kind of goes clean. I like that part a lot. Yeah. I think that came out really neat. So I'd say The Life, probably.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Those are all great songs. I definitely, you're hitting the ones I really like myself. So the future, buddy. What's we've already talked on what you're doing now, but I saw that Plea for Purging is playing Furnace Fest, so you want to talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah. So when they announced before COVID hit that they were going to do Furnace Fest, it was like immediately, it was like, oh man, I would love to get an offer for that. That'd be so cool. I don't know if we would be able to do it, but it would just be cool. You know, I want to go. You know, whether we play or not, I wanted to go. And so I think we did get an offer, but it just getting everybody back into town. Yeah, financially, just it wasn't going to work. I mean, you know, flying in Aaron and taking off work and doing all that stuff, it would have been really difficult. But of course, COVID kind of put a damper on that first year. Similar situation for the next year. But this one came around and it was like, it just kind of made sense. And like I said, we're all still buddies. We all still talk regularly. So it's not, you know, we're all in touch, but, this year came around and they gave us a really good offer. And it was kind of like, duh. Okay, let's see what happens. And then, you know, it's like, I heard me and Andy first when we got the offer, like, okay, so who's going to call who? Are you going to call John or I'm going to call Aaron or vice versa? You know, like that kind of thing. It's like, okay. And then sure enough, like within a couple hours, everybody's like, yeah, screw it. If we sound like crap, who cares? It'll be fun. So it was kind of like, wow, this feels exciting. And I think the only rule that we all had, or like really the only caveat that any of us said was like, as long as it's fun and not like a headache or hassle or eye roll or an obligation. Yeah. Like let's just let's just freaking make it the smoothest, enjoyable, most fun thing we can do. And that's kind of been the approach the whole time. Like,
I love that.
Like even yesterday, like Aaron and I are working on like a rap intro to the set, which we'll see if that happens. But like, just make it fun. And so we're really excited, man. We've known Chad Johnson for a long time. And he's such a good dude, and excited for him and the success of Furnace Fest too. But dude, and honestly, like the more they announce bands, the more I'm stoked. I'm maybe more stoked about seeing some of these guys play than I am playing. Like
X-Toll, bro.
Dude, X-Toll.
I know.
Ah! And like, I love that last Teenage Wrist record a lot. And so that is going to be a really fun one for me, that set. I'm just pumped, man. I'm really excited about it. Tyler, who's going to be playing with us at Furnace Fest, although we asked him to come back and play. He's gone to Furnace Fest before, and he's like, "Yeah, it's great."
I went last year. It was awesome. It was a good.
Yeah.
It felt like I don't know, kind of like going back to school type.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their cool outfits on or whatever, and you're just seeing these. It was very nostalgic, very cool. It was super awesome. So, I'm really looking forward to it.
There's going to be a bottle of ibuprofen in my bag going that weekend for sure. Like, and that's the thing. Like, we know, like, we all look older and fatter. I'm bald. Like, it's like, it is what it is. We're going to play and have fun. We're not worried about the cool factor near as much as we are concerned with getting to see everybody.
It's the hang, bro. It
is. And so I'm pumped, man. I'm looking forward to it's going to be a highlight of my year.
Yeah.
And we've talked about doing some other shows and possibly a Nashville show at some point.
Dude.
It just depends. It's hard, like I said, getting Aaron to fly in because he'd have to take off work, and he's got a kid now too. So it's tough.
Maybe you could do it maybe we could do it a couple months later or something, something of that nature.
Yeah. So, I mean, our buddy Wes here in town still promotes shows, and it would be like getting the old gang back together if we did a national show too. And so anything's possible at this point as long as it makes sense for all of us to be in the same room for long enough to make it happen. But yeah, I mean, we're not opposed to it. I would love to put out new music. I think all of us would. The reality of that is a little bit harder to digest than the idea of it, I think. Yeah. So, I mean, I have a ton of material that I've kind of hoarded through the years. None of it really finished. Yeah. But yeah, if I had my way, we'd be putting out new music this year, but we'll see if that actually happens.
Well, maybe that fire gets ignited at Furnace Fest. You never know.
Yeah. And dude, the thing is too, like when people ask me, I feel like people think we're trying to be cryptic. Oh, maybe new music. We're not, like, we're pretty wide open. Like, we don't lie. We don't do that kind of like mystery stuff. I don't know, man. We got some material. Maybe we'll finish it. Maybe we won't.
Yeah. What's to say?
I don't know. So, I mean, it's fun to play. I've got my little project studio. Aaron, he's got a little studio set up out west. And so maybe if me and him can be more diligent about throwing ideas around, maybe something will happen. But I would love to. I would love to put on new music.
That's awesome. Well, I hope it is a success for you, which I'm sure it will be. I'm planning on being there, so it'd be cool to hang. But man, that's really cool. I really appreciate you coming, taking time out of your busy home inspection business.
No, this is great. I love this. This is more fun for sure.
Dude, I wanted to talk to you for a long time. It's funny because I got off social media forever, and I had no one's phone numbers. And so, like, I literally one day was drinking bourbon and smoking a cigar, and I started Googling everything I could to try to find you. And that's how I don't know if you remember, I reached out to your business and she texted me back and was like, "What is this about?" And then you called me immediately. And I was just like, I did that to a couple people, like Colin from As Cities Burn. I did the same thing. He just I just found him online. Ryan from Terminal and O Sleeper, same thing. It's like, I know it's bizarre. I come out of nowhere, but it's just like, I need to get in these people's lives.
I love it. No, that's the best kind of message I can get on the work line. Dude, it's cool.
Love that.
I'll say this too. Like, my lead inspector gets cracked up because it'll happen every now and then to where one of our clients knows about the band. And so, I show up looking all professional in my work clothes, my polo and stuff. I mean, I have tattoos, but whatever. Everybody in Nashville does. But yeah, I'll show up and then finally it'll slip out like, "Are you in a plea?" You know, and of course my lead inspector just looks at me like, "Oh, here we go again." You know, like, so I like that part of it too. It's funny to see people in like my adult life, work life now know about the band. It's like, oh my gosh, that's such a weird convergence of my two lives almost. But
that's cool.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. I'm glad you reached out. I remember that now that you say that. But dude, I love it. I like my wife, she kind of rolls her eyes at me because like this has happened a couple times. We'll be like in Target checking out, and then the kid checking us out, which is probably not a kid, probably in his 30s. But he's like, "Hey, you know, are you Blake from Plea?" You know, and I'm like, I freaking love it. I'm like, I'm not weird about it. I'm like, dude, thank you for saying something.
Yeah,
you make me feel so
autograph.
Good. Yeah, I love it. I love that crap. Like I'm into it.
Good.
I'm not weird about it. It's not an ego thing. It's just like, man, that makes me feel really good.
That's awesome.
Love that.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, it's happening less and less for sure because I look quite a bit different, but Andy's still big and bald. So he's, you know, people see him and his burger truck. He'll get a lot of people coming to the burger truck talking about the band, which is really cool.
I bet. That's super cool, man. Awesome. Blake, dude, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, dude. It's been an awesome conversation. So let's hang soon. Maybe at Furnace, maybe before, maybe after. Who's to say? So
absolutely, man. I would love that.
All right, buddy. We'll talk soon.
Jerin.
Tell the guys I said hey, by the way.
I will, for sure.
All right, brother.
I do.
Bye-bye. Hey, thanks so much for tuning into this latest episode. I'd like to thank Blake for his time. I know he's a busy, busy man, so I really appreciate all the time that he's given me, and it was a really cool conversation. Thank you, the listener, for tuning in. Really appreciate all the support. It's really been awesome the last 6 months. Really, really excited again about all the upcoming episodes we've got. I know I say it repeatedly, but I'm really, really stoked. So again, thanks so much to Blake, and thank you.